night as we build these early in the day. So we want to make sure that you're constantly paying attention to what's going on throughout the day. And normally we start with just me, my big ass head, my ugly face, and whoever's behind me. In this case, it's Pascal Siakam. Great Russo name, by the way. Pascal Siakam. But I did want to show you this. Now, this isn't just to brag about the 2-0 night that we had in the NHL. It's to show you how well this Bet Pro tool is working for us. Now, when I create these videos early in the morning, our Bet Pro information is not up yet. As you see, available 11 Central Time. So about noon Eastern, you start to see our Bet Pro tool populate. We're going to give you a free week. I know you want to get to the 5-5 and all the bets and all this other stuff, but this is how you can win. All of us on the Stokastic team, on the Odd Shopper team, we're using this tool. You see people in our Discord giving out Bet Pro tool plays. It's working. We want to give you a week free right away. I had one last night, Emmanuel quickly under 14.5 points. We smashed it. We absolutely smashed it. And I knew to bet that from Bet Pro. And I gave it out on the Discord and said, hey, if you're not, so even the Discord where you get a first free week. I just wanted to show you the Bet Pro tool before we begin. Okay? That's all. That's it. Just a vendor, just a quick little thing. Now we can start the clock. 5 bets in 5 minutes. Let us begin. Speaking of Pascal Siakam, got a really good shot here. This is plus 370, just under 4-1 or north of 350, however you want to look at it. Pascal Siakam to lead the game in scoring. Let me just make sure I got this right. Yeah, I get it. Jaylen Brown now without Jason Tatum is the odds-on favorite, and rightfully so, but he's not guaranteed a 35-point night just because Tatum is out. In fact, Boston is most likely going to do their best to spread. Doesn't mean that Brown can't hit 25 or 26, but I'm not touching that 28.5-point line for him. I would rather look at plus 370 as far as Pascal Siakam moving into the leading scorer of the game at a great number. Look, Van Vliet burns us. Gary Trent burns us. That's fine. It ain't going to be Malcolm Brogdon. We know that. All right, let's get to a typical points prop here. Kristaps at 22.5. Sorry, Kuz. Kristaps, 22.5 points. Seems a little off. They're at home against Orlando, who had to work hard last night, right? We know that. Second leg of the back-to-back for this Magic team, who extinguished the Pelicans, but it wasn't, and despite what the score said, it wasn't easy. They had to battle back and all. Somebody's going to have to do work here in order to put the Washington Wizards up by a large margin. And the easiest matchup exploitation is not actually Kuzma in this. We'll wait to see what's going on with Beal, but it's just Porzingis. It's Porzingis from the corner. It's for Porzingis from the perimeter, pardon me. It's Porzingis to get in and work that Orlando front court. So Porzingis getting us to 23 is fine. In fact, I might even look to stretch that to 25 plus on an alternate. No need to here. It's just 5 bets in 5 minutes. We don't like to go super crazy. But I'm going to hit you with another plus play here. No Smith. We know that. Porter Jr.'s been out. We know that. Jalen Green gets some volume bump here. And Minnesota is not locked down, shut down on the perimeter by any means. So we've got to be able to identify volume when it pops up.
Good morning. It's the NBA strategy show for Saturday. Join alongside with me is Ship My Money. Let's talk about Saturday's NBA DFS slate. And shout out to all of you guys who are joining us this morning. And shout out to our presenting sponsor, Prize Picks. We'll touch on some exciting offers that we have with them and some exciting picks that we'll make throughout this show. Adam, how are you doing this morning?
Doing pretty well. Looking forward to taking most of the day off. Going to play NFL today. Probably not going to play NBA. I'll just put that out there as a disclaimer right now. I not expecting to spend my Saturday sitting around waiting for NBA to start, but I don't know. Could change my mind. But either way, looking forward to what I think is going to be mostly a day off.
Yeah, I'm obviously tempted to play NFL. I've never really done that well in the NFL DFS playoffs over the years. I was checking my results, and it's not been like the kindest of results, but it's tough not to change those large prize pools.
Yeah, I typically feel like I don't really do well in playoffs of like any sport, but also normally I do well in the NFL regular season, and I sucked ass this year, so maybe it'll change.
Yeah, and NFL's such a strange one. Like in NBA, like you essentially go through the whole NFL season in like half the month, right?
Right.
And we get it every single night, so you don't have to worry about waiting 6 days and to lose again. You can just get back at it.
Right.
And like,
and well, and it's tough too, because like if you have a losing season, which like I think I ended up slightly negative in NFL this year. If you have a losing season or you have a winning season, it's like it means even less than in other sports, because you're talking about, 18 weeks, however many slates per week, but like, 25 slates, whatever it might be. It's like, I've talked, people say stuff to me about like that they assume like baseball is my best sport or basketball is my best sport. And I'm like, well, it's been football, but also, there's been like 50 weeks of football since I've been playing DFS or whatever. So like, or since I've been seriously playing NFL DFS. So like, I don't know, I might suck and just ran great out of the gate. Like, it's so hard to know if you're actually good at NFL DFS or not.
yeah, and it's just a crazy DFS sport, but it's like the prize pools are there, and it's tough not to chase. I mean, it's
yeah, like my plan today was to just chill, not play any DFS, and then I opened my phone and was like, oh, there's just 100K to first 3 max NFL tournaments today. I guess I'm gonna play.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Million Makers always entice me, but those are, lottery tickets, but it's always fun to chase a little bit there. But another NBA Saturday. Saturdays in the NBA are kind of fluky, wild. We never know what to expect with injury news. It's a bit volatile than other days, pretty much this season especially. We'll see what news breaks throughout the day. Some potential players are expected to play tonight. Giannis might return for the Bucks today. And we'll touch on some of the key points for team by team stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Hit that like button for us, subscribe button. And if it's your first time joining us, thank you for joining us at the Stokastic YouTube channel. First game, we'll go ahead and touch on Orlando taking on Washington. Orlando is 6-point underdogs going to Washington tonight. And this Orlando team is very difficult to go to in DFS purposes because it's a pretty balanced rotation. The team is fully healthy. Jonathan Isaac is doubtful. There is going to be a time where Jonathan Isaac is going to return and he's going to be in the rotation. It's been years that he was a really good NBA rotation player, excellent defender, and I don't know what the minutes will look like once he's there. But for the sake of today, tournament winning upside players, Banchero, Wendell Carter, Franz Wagner was excellent last night. In the Washington matchup, I like taking some chances with Wendell Carter, but everyone else is just kind of shrugging your shoulders, and I really don't want to waste too much time with this Orlando team. You can pick and choose your tournament spots here, but does anyone really stick out to you for tournament purposes tonight?
If we assume that everybody is in, then no, not particularly. It's a good matchup against Washington. You have decent pricing on guys like Wendell Carter Jr., Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner at 6,600. Fultz is reasonable at 6,100. But the problem here is just that this team is getting healthier. You're getting deeper rotations and also inconsistency in those rotations. Like, for example, yesterday, I'm pulling it back up now. I don't remember the exact tweet, but Bol played 6 minutes in the first half and then played the final 14 minutes of a competitive game. You had Cole Anthony, Mo Wagner, and Bol all in the closing lineup. Mo Wagner had played 2.5 minutes in the first half. It's just a really risky team because you have so many actual NBA players in this rotation that they can kind of switch things up on the fly. Banchero, you assume is typically going to get his low to mid 30s in minutes. Wagner is typically going to get his, but even last night you got 25 minutes from Banchero. He didn't play it all in the fourth quarter. Fultz and Wendell Carter didn't play it all in the fourth quarter. It's just a really risky team, although there is upside on these guys.
Yeah, and I want to touch on a $9.99 super chat from Hippopotamus saying thank you for satisfying Hungry Hippo last night. I placed third in the $600. Thanks to your advice. Love you guys with all my weight. Hippopotamus, thank you so much for the super chat, and congrats on you coming in top 3 in a really, really, really difficult tournament to do so. That's awesome. Congratulations. Hope you're enjoying yourself to a nice Saturday with that win.
Yeah, it's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah. Any Any final thoughts on Orlando before we switch over to Washington?
No.
All right, on to the Washington side we go. This Washington team is kind of healthy now with the return of Bradley Beal, and that just took away some usage from the likes of Kyle Kuzma and Kristaps Porzingis and some extra rotational minutes to the bench players. But in a Washington team, they're kind of priced appropriately. My favorite player probably to go to is Bradley Beal at 7,400. I know he's kind of taken a back seat in terms of usage. He was pretty vocal about that. He's only $29 on Yahoo. 83 on FanDuel doesn't look as appealing, but 7,400 on DraftKings seems like a nice spot for Bradley Beal. It seems like it's been a while since we've been able to go to Bradley Beal at this type of price point. Any concerns him coming back from injury? It's been played a couple games, but that's a kind of a cheap price tag. I know his usage isn't been as high as it once was, but 7,400 is still cheap for Bradley Beal's upside. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think it's a cheap price tag for his upside. My biggest concern is that he played 29 minutes in his first game back. Typically, you don't see Washington really limit Beal too much when he comes back, but we've seen Beal kind of get hurt, come back, get hurt again, come back, get hurt again. So it wouldn't be too surprising if now they actually do limit him a little bit more. You got 28.7 minutes last game. If he plays like 32, 33 minutes here, he has a ceiling, but the usage is down and you have those playing time concerns. So those are both actual concerns, but still overall this year 1.13 DraftKings points per minute for Beal. If you give him like 32, 33 minutes, I think he still looks pretty decent at 7,400. If you guaranteed me he played 35 or 36, I would think he was underpriced. Yeah,
and the rest of the Washington team, just like Orlando, I'm not that intrigued to really go to anyone in significant fashion. Interested in getting above the field on guys like Kuzma and Porzingis. They certainly have an upside, but it just seems like it doesn't seem all that necessary. I think there are better spots later on the slate, but any other final thoughts on the rest of the Washington Big Three?
A lot's going to depend on ownership here. We have seen salaries come down a little bit. Kuzma's down to 8,400 on DraftKings. He'd been pushing 9K. You have Porzingis at 9K with power forward eligibility. 1.1 DraftKings points per minute for Kuzma in 22 games this year where Porzingis and Beal have been active. For Porzingis, 22 games, 1.3 DraftKings points per minute. These guys are still good point per minute guys and in a good spot. So if they're not very popular, I do think they're good tournament plays. If they do end up getting a lot of ownership, they are at price points where I think you can probably find lower owned alternatives.
I agree. But that really wraps up the rest of this matchup here. Hit that like button for us and that subscribe button for us, and take advantage of the exciting exclusive offer we have with PrizePicks. Find a link in the description where you can take advantage of that PrizePicks offer and get a free month of Stokastic Plus. And up to $100 deposit match bonus with PrizePicks. If you guys haven't played on PrizePicks yet, I highly recommend to do so. It's an exciting way to play player prop contests. You can bet on over/under on fantasy scores, leverage our tools to do so. It's a pretty exciting tool for you guys to take advantage of. We also have a PrizePicks tool where you can see the expected win percentage. And right now they have a line of 23.5 for Kyle Kuzma. Our data and tools team has Kyle Kuzma just above 21.5. An expected win percentage at 59%. So use Kuzma as a starting point for your PrizePicks card tonight. I think it's a pretty solid under to take with Kyle Kuzma. But on to the next game we go. Charlotte taking on Atlanta. And unfortunately, LaMelo Ball had a pretty gruesome ankle injury, his third ankle injury after a couple fluky ones. And this one looked really bad. And LaMelo Ball is not going to be playing. And that's going to open up a usage for guys like Terry Rozier, potentially PJ Washington and Gordon Hayward. But Dennis Smith Jr. is going to get quite a bit of ownership, in my opinion. He's going to potentially play around 30 minutes. That's what our data and tools team has him for. And an Atlanta spot, with no LaMelo Ball, there should be some usage to be spread around, some facilitation, extra facilitation to be spread around. I like getting above the field on guys like Rozier and Dennis Smith Jr. I know Gordon Hayward, it's been a little tricky with what's happening with Gordon Hayward. He is probable coming back from a hamstring soreness injury. So I'm intrigued to go to the Charlotte team because of a guy missing. Good pace up, 234.5. The totals there against Atlanta. How do you feel about the Charlotte team and kind of an order of preference who to get above the field on tonight?
Yeah, I mean, it should open up a lot here. You Obviously, you're taking off LaMelo. You still don't have Kelly Oubre. You're getting Hayward back, but he's not the highest usage guy at this point in his career. So you have a 4K Dennis Smith Jr. That's going to just stand out as an excellent value play. He played most of the minutes after LaMelo got hurt last game. LaMelo subbed out with 9 minutes and 18 seconds to go in the third quarter. And Smith played the rest of the quarter, played the first 2:46 of the fourth, went to the bench, and then closed for the final 5 minutes and 20 seconds. So I'm expecting just like full starter run here from Dennis Smith Jr., who without LaMelo on the floor this year, overall, Dennis Smith Jr. is around like a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy, I believe, without LaMelo on the floor, 0.9 DraftKings points per minute. But that's also on 47% true shooting. Not that Dennis Smith Jr. is a great shooter, but that's a very low percentage. So it should kind of reinforce that he doesn't even need to have a good shooting game to be close to a fantasy point per minute guy on average. And it just makes him look really, really good. I'd expect him to be extremely popular, but also just a play that is difficult to get away from. As far as the rest of the team, we'll have to wait and see if Hayward is starting or if he is limited. He's played 380 minutes without LaMelo this year, 0.9 DraftKings points per minute on 23% usage. PJ Washington is at 0.9 DraftKings points per minute. So is Jalen McDaniels. You get 1.07 DraftKings points per minute with nearly a 30% usage rate from Terry Rozier. So that's going to make him look good. He's coming in at 7,600. So still a very fair price tag for him, likely playing 36 minutes or so. I think that Rozier, Plumlee, Washington, Smith all look good. I think that Dennis Smith Jr. clearly looks the best given his salary, but no problems with Rozier, Plumlee, Washington either. If you want to gamble on the backup center rotation, I don't hate that as long as there's not ownership coming in either. The thing to keep in mind is that we have seen some games where it's Nick Richards recently, some where it's Mark Williams. The last couple have been Mark Williams, but prior to that, the last couple were Nick Richards. So I still don't have a feel yet for, are they going to just mostly go to Mark Williams, or are they going to say like 2 games in a row for each guy and switch it up? So he is extremely risky, but at 3,100, if Mark Williams plays, he's a good value.
Yeah, and if he plays, that's the thing, right? It's been kind of tricky with that situation. It actually burned me a couple times. I had a lot of exposure to Mark Williams because he's a pretty solid fantasy point per minute guy, and he just wasn't in the rotation a couple games ago, and now he's back in. So it's kind of, I don't want to get burned by that situation again, but it's pretty high risk, high reward over there. Dennis Smith Jr. is kind of a different play at 5,700 on FanDuel, not as intriguing as that 4K price tag on DraftKings, but he's only $13 on Yahoo. It's a Charlotte team that's going to have a lot of ownership, in my opinion. I definitely think there's a pathway for many of these guys to succeed with no LaMelo Ball. But let's keep an eye on what those Gordon Hayward minutes look like. Because if he's going to play around 30 minutes, he's already, I think, a solid option to go to. For some reason, he has no minutes limit. He could play mid-30s. He looks outstanding across the board. 54, 5,300 on DraftKings and FanDuel, respectively. Checks in at $19 over there on Yahoo. So the Charlotte teams, as of right now, if the slate were to start in like 45 minutes, would be kind of the core of the slate. But it's a Saturday, I think, expecting a lot of other news to break throughout the day. Onto the Atlanta side we go. And Atlanta's on a back end of a back-to-back. DeJounte Murray had a very intriguing All the Smoke podcast. He had a lot of enticing points that he made during his time in San Antonio. He also balled out last night. He was pretty impressive. And he comes in at $8,300 and $8,600 and 33 over there on Yahoo. Trae Young, 93 and 96. I think those are the 2 guys who I tend to look to more times than not for this Atlanta team when they're healthy. Clint Capella, I believe, is questionable, or is he questionable?
They played yesterday, so we don't have an injury report yet.
No injury report yet. So Capella is on a back end of the back-to-back. His minutes were supposed to go up last night. I didn't go back and check what those minutes look like last night. But if for some reason if Capella doesn't play, you can look at Onyeka Okongwu. If he's going to start. But I think Murray and Young look good to me. If you want to get more exposure to John Collins at 5,600, no issues. But if Capella's going to play full minutes, he looks outstanding. A lot of intriguing spots for Atlanta in a Charlotte matchup. I certainly think 1 or 2 of these guys can be exceptional. What do you think about this Hawks team?
Yeah, excellent matchup here. The Clint Capella news is going to be big, like you said. He's 50. We're going to have a center that we can like from Atlanta, most likely. Capella's coming in at $5,500. They had said they were going to increase his playing time. He played 6.5 minutes in the first quarter. He played 6.5 in the second quarter. Played 6.5 to open the third. Never came back into the game, which was weird, but it was also like a 15 to 20 point game. they just went with Okongwu down the stretch. So it's going to be, if Capella's in, it's going to be a risky spot still. But if you were to get like 26 minutes from a $5,500 Capella, he's going to look pretty good. If he's out, though, and you get a $5,200 Onekwa Okongwu starting here, he's going to look like an excellent option. If Capella's in, either one is kind of interesting in tournaments. I would still lean Capella, just thinking that they're going to ramp his minutes up. But like we saw yesterday, you're getting around 48 minutes from these two guys. If you get a 20-minute Clint Capella game, you're getting around a 27, 28-minute Onekwa Okongwu game at what I assume would be very low ownership off the bench. So either one of these guys, if Capella is in, are interesting as far as low-owned tournament plays, assuming they're going to be relatively low-owned. If Capella's out, though, Okongwu is going to be very popular, but he should be.
Agreed. And it's got something to keep an eye on. It's another pretty important news on the center slate. There aren't that many intriguing centers on this slate. I mean, there is Joel Embiid later on in the night and Sabonis, but if you want to spend in the mid tier, Capella and Okongwu, depending on the news, can certainly pan out for you. This is a very intriguing tournament matchup, and I think there's a lot of DFS goodness for tonight's NBA slate in this game.
Yeah, and we did just get ownership. So right now, we have Capella projected for 4%, Okongwu for 2%. Okay. If that situation holds, that just becomes like fascinating in tournaments. Obviously, you don't want to play them together, but at their salaries, it's basically a given that one of them is going to play enough minutes that they would project well at their salary. Whether they do well or not is obviously a lot different story, but if you're just going to split 48 minutes in some fashion between them, if they both played 24 minutes, Okongwu looks decent at 5,200 and Capella looks decent. But assuming one of them plays more than 24, whichever one it is going to look good.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty solid there. And I do think that ownership will evolve based on the news throughout the day, but something to keep an eye on for sure. On to the next game we go. Click that like button for us. And thanks so much for joining us on the Saturday morning NFL division round. I know NBA is pretty much in the NFL shadow today, but there's money to be won. And the Milwaukee side of things. And Giannis is questionable to return. So he's potentially going to return. It's been a while since we've seen Giannis play dealing with that knee injury. It's been there was a game that he was supposed to play, and then he went from probable to out, it felt like. But now Giannis is I think Giannis will play tonight. So 11-8, 11-4. It's Giannis. Depending on what news we get, if there's a minutes limit, there certainly could be because it's been some time since he's played. But it's Giannis. We know what he can do if he's going to play full minutes. That's the thing. If he's going to play full minutes in a Cleveland spot, Giannis has tournament appeal. But then if Giannis doesn't play, it's like the same situation with the Bucks trying to figure out how much Drew Holiday we can get to at 8-8 and 8-6. He's not that intriguing if Giannis plays, in my opinion. It's like a very low-owned tournament play if you want to go there. But everyone else is kind of priced like if Giannis were to be out. So it makes for a very difficult Milwaukee team to go to. Kind of besides Giannis is my take right now. What's your take with this Bucks situation, especially with the Giannis injury?
If Giannis is in, I don't have a ton of interest here. Clearly, it goes without saying that if you get to Giannis, that's great. It's Giannis. He's fantastic, but he's expensive. He's 11-8 on DraftKings. We don't know how many minutes he's going to play, but even if you assume he plays full minutes, it's still a slow Cleveland team. It's a good defensive Cleveland team. You have strong mid-range plays, that we've already talked about. This Charlotte team, for example, not only do you have, the Dennis Smith value, but you have all those mid-range guys that look underpriced. You have Washington guys favorably priced, Beal, Kuzma, and Porzingis. It just, so far, I think is setting up as a slate where it's going to be tough for me to really want to get to Giannis over some of the other options that we have. But if Giannis is in, then yeah, it's really tough to pay $8,800 for Drew Holiday against Cleveland, $6K for Lopez, $7,200 for Portis. Like all of that stuff just disappears. Whereas if Giannis is out, it's still a bad matchup against Cleveland, and you're not going to feel overly confident, but you get a big bump in usage for Drew Holiday. You get more playing time for Bobby Portis. You probably get a couple extra minutes for Brook Lopez. You get more minutes for the combination of Allen, Connaughton, Ingles. It makes this team a lot more interesting if he's out, but if he's in, I really have nothing outside of maybe getting to some Giannis.
Yeah, and it's going to come down to that Giannis news, and we'll see what happens there. I am willing to take some chances with Giannis if there's no minutes limit. I think I'm going to take some chances on tournaments. I do think there will be enough value on this Saturday to just like jamming in the stars in Scrubsville, but if there is a limited Giannis, it's tough to pay up for that price tag. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, right now we have him projected for 2% ownership with a 12% chance of being optimal. That ownership number is lower than it would be just because he still has the Q tag and that's throwing it off. But if you get, on a 6-game slate, if you get, let's call it like a 9% owned Giannis, there's just inherent appeal there because you're getting one of the best fantasy options in the league at 10% or less ownership. So there's always going to be appeal to getting there. It's just from a roster construction standpoint, the way things are setting up right now, I think I'm more likely to just go to those mid-range guys a little bit more similarly to last night.
Yeah, and I think that's something we have to monitor throughout that day there. But I think moving on to the Cleveland side of things, and Cleveland's another interesting spot here. Donovan Mitchell, I believe, remains question. They played last night, so he might miss another game. And Darius Garland was outstanding last night as they lost to a shorthanded Golden State team, I think, and which is really shocking. And Golden State pulled off that victory without their main studs. Good on Golden State to defeat that Cleveland team. But if Mitchell's out, you can just certainly look to Garland and LeVert. I certainly like taking some chances with them. And now if Mitchell's in, it kind of ruins the situation for a lot of these guys. I'll definitely take some chances in the front court, that being Garland, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. 6'5" and 6'2" for Allen and Mobley, respectively. A little bit more different story on FanDuel, 7.9 and 7K over there. But it's a Cleveland team where it's going to come down to the Donovan Mitchell situation. If Mitchell plays, not that much interest in Mitchell, maybe a little bit. But if Mitchell's out, I'm certainly willing to get above the field on multiple of these Cavs guys. It's tough to break down this team just because of the Donovan Mitchell situation. How do you feel about this Cavs team? And it's really difficult. And another thing is we're going to get Dean Wade returning. The White D Wade will be returning for this Cleveland team. And apparently there's already been news that he's going to play around, but his minutes limit's between 12 and 15 today. So that's another body in the rotation. Who he's going to take minutes from, I'm going to ask you. Who do you think he takes those minutes away from?
Probably Lamar Stevens. My guess is that if you look at yesterday's rotation, if we assume the same guys are in, which I think Mitchell's going to play, but for the sake of this conversation, if we get the same guys in, I think Lamar Stevens becomes Dean Wade and Howell Neto becomes Ricky Rubio. If Mitchell is in, then I don't know. Either a Okoro or Chetty, but I don't really know. He could cut into Karis LeVert's minutes potentially if they just add him to the rotation instead of removing somebody. Either way, I don't think he's going to have. I don't think Dean Wade's going to have a DFS impact because if Mitchell's in, you're not really looking to go to LeVert anyway. And so that risk doesn't matter. If he's out, then LeVert's playing enough minutes that it doesn't matter. And he's just going to be a good play. So I don't think it matters too much for DFS, but I am just curious to see kind of where those minutes come from. Mitchell went through shoot around yesterday, still didn't play on the front end of the back-to-back. I assume he's going to go tonight. And if he does, I'm with you. It just doesn't look like a very appealing spot. If you want to get to a little bit of Mitchell, that's fine at 8,900, but Darius Garland's salary has come up. He's a little over a 1 fantasy point per minute guy with Mitchell, but you get that huge bump when Mitchell is out. So to pay 8,700 for Garland, I'm certainly going to want Mitchell to be out. The front court's going to look okay. Evan Mobley at 6,200. He's averaged about a fantasy point per minute this year in the games where both Mitchell and Garland have played. If he can avoid foul trouble here, you're likely getting 34 or 35 minutes. He's been better without Mitchell on the floor, but at a fantasy point per minute, there is still a path to success for him here. Similarly with Jared Allen at 6,500, should give you 32 to 34 minutes. He's kind of, independent of Mitchell, going to look like a high upside option, but still not a priority. But I think, if Mitchell is out, kind of similar to the other side with Milwaukee, where there's not a lot of interest if Giannis is in, but if he's out, there's a lot to like. Same with Cleveland. If you take Mitchell out, I'm more than happy to go back to an $8,700 Garland. Mobley and Allen would still look good. 5,300 for Karis LeVert would look very appealing given how many minutes we expect him to play. So again, it's just a spot where we kind of need to wait for that news.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different. That team is a completely different story if Mitchell's out, and now if Mitchell's in, that's just kind of this tale of NBA DFS. It's just one like stud is out. It just opens up so much more if these guys are underpriced. But let's move on to the next game. Houston taking on Minnesota. Click that like button for us and shout out to Prize Picks. If like I said, exciting offer in the link in the description. We'll touch on some other Prize Picks plays throughout the night, throughout the show. But in this Houston-Minnesota matchup, it's no Kevin Porter Jr., and that's been the unleashing of Alfred Sengun. Alfred Sengun has been awesome. 8-1 and 7,800. I can't believe Steven Silas brought this guy off the bench in favor of Bruno Fernando. It just baffles me. I think Şengün's an elite offensive talent. He's got some work to do defensively, but in terms of DFS purposes, he's been amazing of late. 8-1 and 7,800. Jalen Green himself has been impressive as well. 8K and 7,700. And Jabari Smith's minutes kind of haven't gone up as much as Jae'Sean Tate has been in the rotation, and KJ Martin's been playing quite a bit. So the rest of this Houston team, it's an interesting matchup in the Minnesota side of things. Şengün and Green are tournament options for sure. They've shown their ability to get an upside with no KPJ. $30.27 for Şengün and Jalen Green on Yahoo look exceptional. I like getting to them, but they're priced towards their new high. How do you feel about targeting Şengün and Green? Does anyone else on this Houston team stick out to you? It's difficult. It kind of seems like a hodgepodge wing rotation and front court rotation outside of Green and Şengün, in my opinion. How do you feel about this Houston team tonight?
I love this Houston squad because in addition to KPJ being doubtful, you also have Jabari Smith doubtful. So that should open up minutes as well. With Kevin Porter Jr. out, we can expect Kenyon Martin Jr. to remain in the starting lineup. That means typically around 30 minutes from him. He is 4,800 in a good matchup here against Minnesota. But starting with Şengün and Green, one other thing to keep in mind with Alperen Şengün is not only does his per minute production increase when Kevin Porter Jr. is out. He's at 1.3 DraftKings points per minute in 278 minutes without Porter Jr. on the floor this year. But unrelated to Kevin Porter Jr., his playing time has increased recently as well. For a lot of this season, we've seen when the Houston front court is fully healthy, we've seen essentially a three-man rotation where Şengün, barring foul trouble, plays around 28 minutes, and then the other 20 are split between Garuba and Fernando. A week or two ago, they kicked Bruno Fernando out of this rotation, except for games where somebody's in foul trouble. And since then, you've seen Şengün playing huge minutes when he avoids foul trouble. Instead of it being like, if he avoids foul trouble, you get 28 to 30. If he avoids foul trouble, you're getting like 36 plus now. And when he is in foul trouble, as long as it's not the kind that just, the Naz Reid kind, he's still getting, like 30 minutes. So the playing time expectations for Şengün is just much higher now than it had been. Then you also get Porter being out. It makes Şengün look really, really good, even at the elevated price tag, I think. Jalen Green, 39 and a half minutes last game. You expect him to play a little bit more with Porter out as well. He's at 1.11 DraftKings points per minute overall this year without Porter on the floor, but he also has a 33.3% usage rate. So it's a situation where the point per minute production is good, but it also doesn't really tell the full story in terms of how high this guy's ceiling is when he's just going to be shooting pretty much every time that Şengün doesn't. So it makes him look good. Mention Kenyon Martin Jr. as a value piece, but another spot that's interesting and to pay attention to is who gets the start in place of Jabari Smith Jr., assuming that he misses this game, because Tari Eason has basically been the straight backup to Jabari Smith for most of the season, but you do have Jae'Sean Tate back now as well. It would be very easy to just slot Jae'Sean Tate into the starting lineup and keep Tari Eason in his backup role. Either way, one of them, if not both, are going to be interesting tournament options because those minutes are opening up. Without Porter on the floor this year, Tate's played 82 minutes, 0.75 DraftKings points per minute, but I'm not reading too much into that. He is somebody that we know can actually facilitate a bit. He can score a little bit. He's just another one of these guys that doesn't do any one thing exceptionally well from a fantasy standpoint, but he does a lot of things good enough that at a cheap price tag and increased playing time, he can produce well. Tari Eason's at 1.1 DraftKings points per minute. It's really for him just a matter of does he get the minutes. So they're both pulling 8 to 10% ownership right now, which makes sense. Eric Gordon at 4,500. About a 20% usage rate this year when Porter is out and Green is on the floor. So to me, I think the priorities are Şengün and Green. Or the priorities are probably Şengün, Martin from a value standpoint. Then I really like Green for his ceiling. But whichever guy starts between Jae'Sean Tate and Tari Eason is going to look like a very good value as well.
Yeah, and Jae'Sean Tate has point guard small forward eligibility on DraftKings. And that reason alone might put me into position getting a little bit above the field on both Tari Eason and Jae'Sean Tate. I think when Eason's given the minutes, he's been really productive in terms of fantasy production. If he were to start, he looks like one of the best value plays on the slate alongside Dennis Smith Jr. I think Tari Eason's has some talent, but I'm willing to take some chances on both Tate and Eason, regardless of whoever starts. And I think there's a pathway of both succeeding. Obviously, whoever does start potentially might get more minutes, but I think that just will open up a ton of minutes, and they're priced cheap enough where I have no issues playing them both. I think it's like you said, a very intriguing Houston team. kind of top to bottom, more or less. And we'll see how this news breaks out throughout the day and what ownership looks like in your lock. But great, that was a great breakdown for that Houston front court potential rotation tonight. But on the Minnesota side we go. Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, D'Angelo Russell. Last time out, Rudy Gobert didn't play, and then Naz Reid was north of 90% owned in the high stakes tournaments, and he failed. He didn't pay off that salary for that slate, and Gobert remains questionable. And now, if Gobert were to be out, I'm going to go right back to Naz Reid, even at $5,100. A little bit of a different story at $6K. But if Reid can stay out of foul trouble, that would be nice, and I think he can definitely pay off a $5,100 power forward center price tag. But Anthony Edwards $9,100 and D'Angelo Russell $6,700 in a Houston spot. I really like going to. I like getting above the field on both those players. Kyle Anderson was awesome last time out. I think depending on what the ownership comes in for slow-mo, I'll potentially get a little bit above the field. Different story at $7,200 on FanDuel. That is like a career high for slow-mo, so I'm a little cautious there. But $5,900 on DraftKings. Another intriguing matchup. Houston, Minnesota, Charlotte, Atlanta stick out quite a bit. We spent quite a bit of time on both these matchups, and I think rightfully so. This whole team looks really good. Even if Gobert's out, that'll open up so much more upside for a guy like Naz Reid. Now, if Gobert's in, I'm willing to play some Gobert at $7K as well. How do you feel about this Minnesota team? Another intriguing team in terms of tournaments, in my opinion.
Yeah, and another team that obviously has very, very big injury news that's going to have massive implications. But if Gobert is in, I'm with you as far as, in tournaments, if you want to roll the dice on him at $7K, fine. Just understand there is a lot of risk there because we've already seen him come back and get re-injured immediately. So there's just, probably some added risk here, but everybody's also aware of that. So it's going to drive ownership down a bit in what is a very good spot against Houston. If he is out, going right back to $5,100 Naz Reid, I think that, obviously he sucked the last couple of games, especially last game. But to me, focusing on the positives from that is what just sort of reinforces how ridiculously good of a play he is at this price tag, especially on DraftKings where he has power forward eligibility. In the 2 games ago, he played 19 minutes in the first half, and then he ended up getting in foul trouble in the second half. Last game, got in huge foul trouble in the first half, played a total of 4 minutes in the first half, played 18 minutes in the second half. We've seen in previous starts this year when he does avoid foul trouble, him get 35, 36 minutes. So Minnesota is trying to treat him like an actual starter. He's just been in foul trouble the last couple of games. But he's a really good point per minute guy that outside of foul trouble, you have no playing time concerns about. And you're getting these games where he's in huge foul trouble and still he's failing, but he's not being horrible. He still got you 22 DraftKings points the other day, despite playing 4 first half minutes. It's just there's no way around how good of a play he is if Rudy Gobert is out. Kyle Anderson, I don't really know what to make of him because on the one hand, it's Kyle Anderson. And Rudy Gobert being in or out shouldn't have a huge impact on him. Karl Anthony Towns has been out for a while now, so I don't know. It's not like that's what has changed suddenly for Kyle Anderson. If you look at his overall rates this year, even without Karl Anthony Towns on the floor, it's nothing exciting. It's just this guy that is, fairly, kind of like I was saying with Jae'Sean Tate, not great at anything, but does everything well. And so he contributes from a fantasy standpoint. 0.9 DraftKings points per minute overall without Towns on the floor. But recently, you've just seen him taking on a bigger role, primarily as a playmaker. You've seen sort of D'Angelo Russell numbers not be quite as good. You've seen these massive games from Kyle Anderson. I don't really know what to make of it because if he continues doing all of the things he's done recently, then he's clearly underpriced. But if he kind of reverts back to what he's been overall this season, then it's just like a correct price tag and the guy's getting 30-something% ownership. So it's a tricky spot. The ownership is certainly expected to be there. We have him at 32%, but he has been playing extremely well. He has been producing. It's not like he's just shooting really well either. He's producing in ways that and getting opportunities we hadn't seen previously, and he's playing big minutes. So I think Anderson is a good play here, but I would pay attention to that ownership. I do think that it seems like he's just been coming in a little bit higher than it probably should recently as a result of his recent performances. If Anthony Edwards is in, it's a great matchup for him at 9,100. Jaden McDaniel should play a bunch of minutes. He's going to look like a decent value. D'Angelo Russell got to 34 minutes last game, which was good to see. He'd kind of been around 31 in a lot of games recently. I think it's just a really good team in tournaments, and it gets even better if Gobert is out.
Yeah, and it's something to keep an eye on. I know last time we touched on the Austin Rivers being questionable, and you brought up an excellent point that would open up more minutes for Torian Prince. And Torian Prince was off to a really hot start that game, and then he cooled off tremendously in the second half. But that's another guy who might play a bit more minutes. I think more minutes went to Noel last game. But it's a Minnesota team, I think, in a Houston spot. You should be looking for tournament appeal for sure. Any final thoughts on this matchup?
Play a lot of guys from it.
Yeah, it's
hard to know exactly right now who all of those guys are, but there's going to be a lot of guys to play from this game.
Yeah, and even like it seems like the Charlotte-Atlanta sentiment is in this Houston-Minnesota sentiment. And I do think the ownership will be elevated compared to the rest of the slate. I mean, Orlando and Washington and Milwaukee and Cleveland, we were just like not about it. And we're like up in arms for both these matchups here. But there's two other games on this slate, and we'll move on to the Indiana and Phoenix matchup. Indiana continues to be kind of shorthanded. They're missing some guys here, and they're on the back end of a back-to-back as well. And they're continuing to be without Tyrese Halliburton still out. And then that's their main guy who's been out, and that's opened up minutes and for guys like Andrew Nembhard to play a bit more. TJ McConnell's put on some elite performances of late. He's priced all the way up. And in this matchup, I mean, I like taking some chances on Nembhard and Hield. I think Andrew Nembhard is a guy who I was willing to get above the field last night. News kind of broke in the way where I didn't get to as much of him that I would have liked, even though the results might have not panned out. But I think Nembhard's someone you can expect to play 30-plus minutes. Buddy Hield's another guy, 6,400, where you get the 3-point bonus. He can find a way to pay off. And Miles Turner always has an upside within him. It's just like the minutes are never consistently in the mid to high 30s, so it's really difficult to go there. And there's some other better spend down center options who project similar to his fantasy projection right now. And the rest of the team is kind of meh. It's maybe just I'm looking at Nembhard and Hield, and that's really about it. Any appeal for Ben Mathen for you? That's another guy who's like doesn't do enough outside of just score raw points, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, with the salary coming up, it's just kind of a tournament play for him. I do like the lack of ownership coming into Indiana. The problem is just that I expect to have so much interest in that Charlotte-Atlanta game, in the Houston-Minnesota game, and then potentially other spots too, depending on where injury news breaks, that it's going to be difficult to prioritize anything from Indiana, and that's why you see the ownership how it is. The thing that is really interesting to me right now, and this could change because we had the inverse of this the other day, and it ended up changing and being like evening out. We have Andrew Nembhard projected for 17% ownership at 5,400. We have TJ McConnell projected for 3% at 5,700 on DraftKings. Nembhard does have shooting guard eligibility in addition to point guard, so he's a little bit easier to get to. I still think McConnell should be the more popular of the two. He's the better point per minute guy. In competitive games, there's a good chance he ends up in the closing lineup. You've seen, the playing time down a bit the last couple of games because of blowouts. Only played 19 minutes yesterday, played, I think, 25 last game, but lost fourth quarter run. The difference, so like in 5 games now where Halliburton's been out, but McConnell's been in, we've gotten 0.86 DraftKings points per minute from Andrew Nembhard. That's fine. Like, I think he's a good play, but McConnell's the better point per minute guy. He's at about 1.1 DraftKings points per minute overall without Halliburton on the floor this year, 1.4 in those 5 games where Halliburton hasn't played at all. Certainly expect that to come down, but the reason that I prefer McConnell to Nembhard whenever they're similarly priced, as long as McConnell isn't going, getting way more ownership, is that McConnell's playing time sort of also, not only does it dictate clearly McConnell's production, it dictates Andrew Nembhard's production. Because when you take Tyrese Halliburton and TJ McConnell off the floor, Andrew Nembhard is extremely productive, in large part because his assist percentage gets up to around 40%. When you take Tyrese Halliburton off the floor, but put TJ McConnell on, Andrew Nembhard's rates look basically exactly like when he plays with Tyrese Halliburton. He has like a 16% assist percentage. He averages like 2/3 of a fantasy point per minute. So if you're going to get similar ownership, or even in this case, less ownership going to McConnell, the better point per minute guy who his playing time is really going to dictate what happens with Nembhard. If McConnell plays well and this game's competitive, Nembhard is probably screwed because McConnell's playing more minutes. So that's just why, all things equal, I prefer McConnell, even though he comes off the bench. That's not to take anything away from Nembhard. It's just to say that I don't think he should be more popular than McConnell. Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, both certainly appealing tournament options. Shooting guard, small forward for Hield at 6,400. Miles Turner, 1.2 DraftKings points per minute without Halliburton on the floor this year. It's simply a matter of, 1, can he stay out of foul trouble? 2, can Indiana stay in the game? If both of those things happen, you're likely getting north of 30 minutes from a very productive Turner at low ownership. Indiana gets blown out a lot and Turner fouls a lot, but still, for a guy that's 3.5% owned, I think you kind of have to like that ceiling.
Yeah, like you said, Indiana team coming in pretty low ownership, and I think there's some great tournament spots. I mean, missing one of their lead usage guys and just a guy who soaks up a ton of minutes. So, and then on the other side of the Phoenix side of things, we get potentially the return of Chris Paul. Chris Paul were to return, that will change the whole story of this team. I believe Saben Lee's contract expired. I don't know if they
renewed it.
They renewed it. Okay, they must have renewed that last night then, because that makes sense then. Now, if they renewed it, maybe that might be a reason to think Chris Paul still might be not ready to go, but we'll see what happens there. He's played well in terms of fantasy production and the minutes he's gotten. Cam Johnson also returned to the rotation last time out in limited minutes. DeAndre Ayton was outstanding at 7,800 and 7,600. I think you can play him. I think I have no issues getting to some DeAndre Ayton, guy who's always pretty like low owned, and just he doesn't project the greatest point per dollar. He's always priced, I think, appropriately. And the news, the way the situation breaks out for him, really sometimes doesn't benefit him. But he balled out against the Nets the other game. Mikal Bridges, 6,800 and 7,200. It's a different story for Mikal Bridges if Chris Paul plays. So another team that's tough to break down, because if Chris Paul were to return and play, I think if he comes with a limited minutes, he might play around high 20s. That certainly takes away a bunch. I don't expect full minutes for a guy like Chris Paul of his age coming back from pretty healthy absence. So it's a Phoenix team, and against Indiana, certainly some guys can get there, but it all comes down to the Chris Paul news. It's really tough to break down. What are your thoughts on this Phoenix team taking on the Pacers?
Yet another team that I am very confident I'm going to like players from. It's just a matter of what their names are. If Chris Paul is in, I'm not interested in Saben Lee. Like, I don't expect Chris Paul and Saben Lee to be playing minutes alongside each other. So you're probably just getting a situation where Saben Lee plays 18, Chris Paul plays 30, something like that. Could he still get there at 3,700? Sure, but not a spot that I'm going to really be looking to get to. But if Chris Paul is out, I want to go right back to Saben Lee. Again, I don't expect him to start, although he could. But we saw a similar rotation last game to what I was expecting. I thought they were going to start Dwayne Washington, and he would start the game, start the second half, but you would have Saben Lee closing at least the fourth quarter, if not both the second and the fourth. They ended up just starting Damian Lee, which the only reason that surprised me is that they had gone to that lineup not too long ago in a competitive game where they benched Dwayne Washington. This was before Saben Lee was on the team. They benched Dwayne Washington. They went with that lineup where you had Damian Lee as the de facto point guard, and it was really ineffective. You had the Suns beat writers tweeting out like, wow, Monty Williams trusts Dwayne Washington so little that he's going with 5 guys who cannot dribble instead of putting Dwayne Washington on the floor. So I was surprised they went back to that as the starting unit. But either way, we got basically what I expected, where Saben Lee was the closer. Saben Lee played a bunch of minutes off the bench. He got up to 30 minutes, played 12 in the first half, which was really scary as somebody that had played a lot of him when Dwayne Washington checked in first, and we hadn't seen Saben Lee the entire first quarter. But he got the run that I expected. So if he starts here, if Paul's out and Lee starts, clearly you can feel good about his minutes. And at 3,700, he's still going to look like a really good value. If Paul is out and they go with that same starting lineup where Damian Lee starts, then I think you still can go to Saben Lee. He does become riskier just because there's always that chance that they just, for whatever reason, go to Dwayne Washington here. Maybe they want to give him a shot against his former team. Like, who the hell knows? But you're still probably getting those Saben Lee minutes. Damian Lee, if he starts, clearly projects for more minutes as well. He isn't very good from a fantasy standpoint, but the guy played 38 minutes last game. There should be a lot of minutes for him there at 4,800. If he starts, he looks okay. But again, that's all dependent on Chris Paul being out. Regardless of Chris Paul's status, DeAndre Ayton's going to look good here. Favorable matchup against Indiana. Gets a usage bump with Devin Booker out. If Chris Paul is back, that, if anything, should probably help Ayton, just because you're getting a good point guard that can get him the ball, as opposed to no point guard when Damian Lee is out there, or a point guard that just came up from the G League in Saben Lee. So I like Ayton one way or the other. And I think Mikal Bridges is basically the same play one way or the other as well. 19 to 20% usage rate without Booker on the floor. It doesn't matter if you take Paul off too, or if Paul's on. That's just kind of what Mikal Bridges is, but he's going to play a ton of minutes. So you're kind of just, when you're playing him at this price tag, you're just saying like, look, I know the minutes are going to be there. Hopefully he runs into some defensive stats and steals. There's a path to those games where he shoots 20 times. It's not going to consistently happen, but it can, which is nice. He just sort of ends up being like a glue guy where you're never going to feel great that you have Mikal Bridges at 6,800, but he just plays so many minutes and is a good enough fantasy producer that he's going to be a solid option.
Yeah, and keep an eye on that news. This is another team where the ownership will evolve throughout the day. And if you guys haven't checked out any of the Stokastic NBA offering, I highly recommend for you to do so. We have a free 5-day trial. And I mean, you already know the success that many guys in chat have had, many guys in our premium Discord have had. So definitely take advantage of that 5-day free trial to Stokastic NBA. I think it's something that will elevate your DFS game to the next level if you haven't checked it out. And we hope that you stick around more than those 5 days, and hopefully you have those success over those 5 days coming up, and definitely recommend to do so. If you have any questions, feel free to hit any one of us up in the Discord or Twitter. Happy to answer your questions, and take advantage of that free 5-day trial that we have going on right now. And now on to the next set of games we go. Philly taking on Sacramento. Philly has been in California for well over a week now. And it's James Harden and Joel Embiid. And now the likes of Harris and Maxey are priced kind of appropriately. Where I'm willing to take some chances on it. Still not. I think I'll be more intrigued when they fall like in the mid 5Ks. Still, I think above 6K make things a little difficult. They'll be low owned, but Harden and Embiid certainly have tournament winning upside. They both have the upside of being one of the highest scoring players on this slate. Harden comes in at $42, 10K, 10.5 on Yahoo, DraftKings, and FanDuel respectively. Joel Embiid, center only spot 11.4, 11.6 on DraftKings and FanDuel respectively. There should be enough value to get Embiid in. He obviously has huge upside in the Sacramento spot. I like thinking about the field on both of Harden and Embiid. The rest of the team, it's a little difficult, different story. It's kind of like we get these Philly slates and we say the same stuff every time. Has your sentiment changed for the Sacramento matchup? I think Maxey and Harris certainly can get an upside, but it's Maxey and Harris playing alongside Embiid and Harden. Makes things really difficult for those guys to pay off.
Yeah, I really just like the lack of ownership coming into this team in this matchup against the Kings. You know, I get that it's not the Houston game or the Charlotte game, but this game is also pretty appealing, especially when you are the team playing the Kings. Joel Embiid, the only player on this team on DraftKings right now getting double-digit ownership at 16%. He should have a field day here against the Kings front court. He's 11-4, going to look really good. James Harden at 10K, only playing 9% ownership. He should give you around 36 minutes. Only played 34 last game. That is a little concerning. We've seen them kind of walking his minutes back. He had kind of been settling into around 36. You got 34 last game. So I do think that's a legitimate concern now that this team's getting healthier. You know, maybe they're going to just not run James Harden into the ground during the regular season, which would probably be a good idea. But either way, the ceiling's certainly there for him. Tyrese Maxey playing 28 to 32 minutes, give or take, off the bench at 6,100 and basically no ownership. He doesn't project great, but you know, on a 6-game slate, I don't mind taking a shot there. One thing that's interesting is that DeAnthony Melton did play 30 minutes last game. PJ Tucker only played 19. We had been getting rotations from DeAnthony Melton as a starter where he was still only playing 22, 23 minutes because he was opening the game, closing the first half, opening the third quarter, and then never being seen again. He closed last game over Tucker. They went with a closing lineup that had Maxey, Harden, Melton, Harris, and Embiid. Kind of interesting, and I think they could do that here against the Kings. Like, you have a very wingy Kings team outside of Sabonis, so I don't think they necessarily need Tucker out there. Like, certainly they could go Tucker, but I don't think it really matters. Like, you're talking about, you know, Harrison Barnes, Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray. You don't really have elite scoring wings here. You're talking about Fox and Sabonis being the guys that do most of the damage. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw that same closing lineup. It's at least likely enough that at 4,300 Melton has some appeal. The thing to keep in mind too, though, is that he's playing the bulk of his minutes with Joel Embiid and James Harden on the floor. So, and not to mention Tobias Harris. So clearly not intended to be very involved offensively. But at 4,300, if you do get those minutes with shooting guard, small forward eligibility, it becomes somewhat appealing. And then finally, you have Tobias Harris, who his usage rate is down this year. He hasn't been a great fantasy option, but he's also not pulling ownership at 6,200 against the Kings. It's just another spot where, for example, I think Mikal Bridges is clearly the better option. But you have Mikal Bridges at 6,800 pulling 25% ownership. You have Tobias Harris pulling 5%. That's just an easy spot within like a given lineup. If you have a bunch of popular plays to be like, all right, I'm just going to play Tobias Harris here and call it a day. Like, that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
And it's, I think, a pretty solid game environment against Sacramento. So definitely like taking some chances there. And I think that's really like a Philly breakdown. Like, the Melton thing is pretty intriguing to take some chances on. I think there's some pretty high reward if the minutes pan out the way they do. Additionally, on moving on to the Sacramento side of things, before we move on, if you guys are listening to us on any podcast platform, please leave that 5-star review. Those go a long way for us. So those podcast reviews definitely help us out in the long haul. But circling back on the Sacramento side of things, I think you can definitely take some chances on Sabonis at 10-5 and 10-3. They're on the back end of the back-to-back. Fox checks in at 8-5 and 8-3. Both those guys have some tournament upside. Now, then you can sprinkle in some interest in guys like Huerter. I prefer going to Kevin Huerter than Harrison Barnes. The 3-point bonus with Kevin Huerter. Malik Monk's minutes aren't high enough to take some chances on, but we know he has that microwave scoring ability of getting just hot. And sometimes you'll see Mike Brown play him additional minutes. Keegan Murray plays a lot of minutes, doesn't do enough with him, but he's cheap at 4,300. The Kings team, it's kind of Fox and Sabonis, and then it's kind of they're kind of like Philly Light. We talk about Fox and Sabonis, and everyone else just kind of shares the court with them and makes things difficult. How do you feel about this Kings team?
Yeah, it's similar to Philly too, in that there's not much ownership coming in here, especially to the two guys that you would really want to get to in Sabonis and Fox. They're both at 8% owned, and I get it. It's always difficult to prioritize an expensive center because there's just always opportunity costs. But then you also have Embiid on the other side from Sabonis. But, I liked Embiid at 15%. I like Sabonis at half of Embiid's ownership as well at 10-5. Assuming he's good to go. He played, 38 minutes last night, wasn't limited. Another triple-double. He's just been excellent this year. This offense is, in general, is fantastic. So I like that. Fox at 8,500, pulling 8% ownership looks pretty good. There are a lot of other good guard options, but Fox looks good. Keegan Murray's just cheap. He's 4,300. He had a hell of a game last night. He said that Mike Brown had gotten in his ear the other day after he didn't get any rebounds, and he just went out there and played his ass off. Obviously, you don't want to read into that too much and just decide that Keegan Murray is this guy going forward. But even just getting 30 minutes or so at his normal rates at this price tag, he's going to look pretty good. If this is kind of the start of him getting some confidence in his rookie year and maybe getting a little bit more playing time, then obviously things can only go up from here. Huerter and Barnes both look fine. Monk is extremely concerning to me. His last 4 games, we've gotten 15, 15, 10, and 15 minutes. So I'm really not confident in the playing time. And I think part of that does have to do with Keegan Murray playing more. And then obviously Huerter and Barnes are getting their minutes as well. You've seen those minutes trend up a bit. Huerter last game, for example, played 35 minutes while Barnes played 39. When you were getting Malik Monk playing 22 minutes a night, you were getting 30 to 32 minutes from Huerter, 32 from Barnes, 28 from Murray. It was just sort of the wings weren't playing as much. But you do still have, like you said, that microwave ability from Malik Monk, where if he, in his first stint, comes out there and shoots, 4 for 4 right out of the gate, do they still just send him right back to the bench? I don't think it's a spot that I would mess with on the 6-gamer, but if you're playing the 2-gamer, if his ownership is low, that's where he starts to become interesting.
Yeah, and those are the type of chances you should be willing to take on 2-game slates. Like Malik Monk can, in 15 minutes, does he have the ability, in 20 minutes, does he have the ability to knock down 3-4 threes, pick up a couple of steals? And that's when you're kind of talking there how he's kind of finding a way to pay off that price tag at low ownership. He's one of those guys. We'll see. There are ways where he can pay off that salary. Foul trouble is one of them. And just him being good on the court is probably the best way of him staying and getting more minutes. But we've seen those minutes go down, and it's not a good trend. And, yeah, going back to the Keegan Murray thing, yeah, if Mike Brown's going to keep on doing that, we can certainly hopefully see the trend up in his salary and his fantasy production, because you would like him to – he's playing so many minutes that price tag is always low, and I'm kind of consistently above the field on him. It hasn't really panned out for me this season on Keegan Murray slates for him. Very rare games that he pops off like he did last night. So he's only $12 over there on Yahoo, so certainly worth taking some chances on Keegan Murray over there. It's going to be another Saturday slate filled with news. Before we wrap up, Adam, do you have any picks for the NFL games? Do you think the Chiefs will win?
I don't even know who's playing today.
Dang. The Chiefs and the Jags are playing, and then Philly and Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the Eagles and the Chiefs.
Eagles
I have no idea
Chiefs?
what the lines are, though, obviously, because
I think, probably at least. And the Chiefs? Okay, there's been a change in the programming schedule as the NHA NFL show is going to be pushed back an hour. We have lots and lots of NFL content over the next 5-6 hours. Millie Makers on the board tonight. Stay tuned through the Stokastic YouTube channel. Enjoy the content. Hit that like button for us. Enjoy your Saturday, and good luck to you guys all tonight across your DFS contest. Embedded.